Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valarie Clark, Senior Vice President of Health Equity and Public Health. And for those of you who are with us from out of town, welcome to DC. This is what we call a power lunch, right? We've got good folks, we've got great food, and we're going to have some laughter all in one. Just a shout out to the folks from Boston. I'm originally from Boston, Roxbury, New Edition. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's what I'm talking about. So just absolutely, you never thought you'd hear that in health equity conversation. But yes, so glad to be here. Very excited about this conversation. We are going to have just a discussion around the threats against DE&I, right? So we're sitting here in the historical National Press Club, and it seems fitting the headlines are just assaulting, right, against DE&I, the people leading DE&I, and all the work that we're doing. And so we're going to have just a really important conversation. And I think Dr. Reed Tuckson, who's left, but he sounded the alarm, the urgency of now. Our moment is now. And so that we should have that kind of energy, bring that kind of energy to work, and then really remember each other in this time. I think Dr. Cherry said, this is really hard work. It's really hard work. And so we have two of the finest leaders in this moment leading in DE&I at this time with us. So we are thrilled to have them with us. Please join me in welcoming them. I'm going to give you an introduction in just a moment. So glad you all are with us. Okay. They probably look familiar to you because they are front and center and they have been in the news for very good reasons, supporting all of us through DE&I. Let me introduce and present to you, first up, Dr. Uche Blackstock. Okay, she looks really familiar to you. She is an emergency physician, former associate professor of emergency medicine at NYU, is founder and CEO of Advancing Health Equity. Its primary mission is really to engage the health organizations around biases and racism in medicine. And you probably remember her in the middle of the pandemic. She was a contributor to MSNBC, and her background in her living room, everyone sort of wanted to go there because it was gorgeous. But she really helped us navigate the pandemic through vaccine education, misinformation, disinformation. She really helped us through that. Most recently, she is the author of the New York Times bestseller. And absolutely, we're so proud. And all of you will get a book. It's right over there. And we are so fortunate that she's willing to stay with us to sign your book. Okay? So that's quite a treat. She recently, this is another fun fact, was in front of the UN, again, talking about racism in medicine. So we are delighted that she's with us and is going to spend some time with us, even at the gala tonight. So please help me welcome Dr. Blackstock. And we also have with us Dr. Maybank. She's a pediatrician and a preventive medicine physician and a leader in public health. She currently serves as the SVP at AMA and the Chief Health Equity Officer. Actually, their inaugural Chief Health Equity Officer, and that's really important. Yes, absolutely. 5 years in. 5 years in. I know. We're going to talk about it. She is a renowned author, speaker, and most recently, we want to thank you for this. If you have not seen this article in the New England Medicine Journal, it is really, you poured your heart into it. The plight of DE&I leaders, heavy expectations, and limited protections. Just candid, thoughtful, and we all need to read it. So make sure you run out and get that. And it's required. It's a must read. If you're going to be in this space and do this kind of work, you really need to know how to protect yourself and then the work that you're doing with your team. She is fearless in how she approaches the challenges and societal norms and DE&I. So we're just thrilled to have you with us, Doctor.
Thank you, Valarie. And just to say, Aletha and Dr. Maybank and I, we're friends. We're very good friends. We used to be neighbors.
In the living room that folks saw, I was in the same building,
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we were both working in COVID during.
And we live in Brooklyn.
So you really were teamed up in the pandemic.
Yeah, and before that, yeah. So yeah, I hope this conversation can just be, a
It is.
casual conversation because we're among friends.
Yeah, you're going to get a peek inside the girlfriend conversations that they have.
And we just had a conversation last Thursday at the Center for Brooklyn History. So we were
Fantastic.
featured there too.
Teamed again. So we're going to dive right in and really talk about sort of the history, knowing our history and our history in medicine, and how that plays into our own healthcare and helping our team, educating them on how important this is, and how we can bring that Dr. Reed Tuckson urgency to the work every day. It is tiring, it's exhausting, educating, making people aware of the importance of this work, but how could we continue to bring that urgency? I wish we had Reed's energy here, but he's left. But really, the time is now. The headlines are daunting. How do we make sure that we're sounding the alarm, if you will?
Sure. It's a big question. And first, thanks for having me, and thank you for being in this space. It's awesome to see how blackdoctor.org has evolved and is continuing to grow and continuing to engage us as Black physicians in providing this space, because this space is so critical for, I think, our survival as well as thriving. The ability to be able to come together in community, to talk, laugh, see folks that we know. It fills our soul. Uche, you said balm. It's a balm to our soul. To be around people. I was at NMA, and I just acknowledge the president of the NMA, National
Dr.
Medical
Lawson.
Association, over there.
Thank you.
Last week speaking, and it was the same thing. You just walk in, and it's just like, I can just sit here. I can keep my shoes on. I didn't have to change my heels. Like, that's what I'm excited about. But I think that's important in how we sustain ourselves during this time of the urgency that's needed. I know many of folks read the piece. Clearly, I'm exhausted, tired. You can hear it in my voice. I look decent today because I'm going on vacation next week, so I'm excited and I'm getting ready.
Her birthday.
For my birthday, yes. Yeah, the big 25 times 2. Yeah. I'm not saying the number yet, but that's where I'm at. But yeah, I have a hard time.
Very good.
So, and as we speak to the urgency of now, and it's not new. So when I think of Reed Tuckson and the leadership, of our president at Mahari, folks who've been doing this work for a long time, whose shoulders we stand on, they have kept this fire, the torch going. I think Montague Cobbs talked about the need, he talked about it in a football reference, which I'm horrible at doing, but this idea of fastbacks and creating space so folks can run through, and running backs. And, I really acknowledge, the leadership that always shows us what it means to be present in these spaces. I think, and as the generations go on, we have a different way of doing it, and I think that is totally fine. We have a different privilege in a different way. And so the urgency for me, I am able to be very direct in spaces. Like, I don't code anymore. What was it called? Code switching. I can't even remember what it's called. Code switching. Like, I don't do that. Even my boss has said that. They're like, no, you don't. And yeah, because I think that's the urgency of now. That's what's needed now. Now you have to create the space. I'm not saying you can just go in and do it. There is some work to be done in order to create that space within your environments, and some spaces just aren't going to tolerate it. So I also acknowledge that as well. However, if you are, in some role of leadership and you have the ability to really speak truth, speak the truth, and oftentimes, really, it's just more so folks aren't used to hearing the truth. But you don't necessarily, they'll tolerate it or they'll listen. And if you know how to speak to them in a particular way, I think we can be more successful than we realize. That's in the context of the institution. I have my whole thoughts about the context outside of the institution. And I heard earlier, Dr. Hildred said, we need to create our own spaces. And I truly, truly believe that now. I've been doing this internal work of encouraging institutions to transform from the inside, changing culture, changing practice, and all of that beyond the DEI context. I'm not a DEI language fan. I use the language because I get that that's what people get. But I'm more equity and clearly then justice and liberation and all of that eventually. But I say that all to say is that we need to, from working in institutions, they're never going to give us that power. There's no intention to do that. And we need to be real about that. And we have to create more of our own. I'm not saying we don't need all of it. And wherever we choose to show up, it is all good and all fine. I don't judge. And I'm sure Uche can speak to that too, and many of you. We've had a lot of judgment, based on where we are in institutions. Why are we there? Why are we doing this? You're not showing up enough. You're showing up too much, all of that. Who cares? So that's one context, but we need to be able to build and create together in different ways that are more impactful, that build wealth, and just really disrupt the systems, but really focus on our strengths and what we need to do.
Amen.
Okay, so there's so much of what you said that I'm sitting with right now, and that's resonating with me. And a lot of it is, the story that I told in Legacy, in my book Legacy, which essentially, for those of you know, says Legacy, a Black physician reckons with racism in medicine. But it was my opportunity to tell my own story, because I was so used to being in environments where I felt undervalued and underappreciated. And I've shared this before, that I forgot that I was someone with gifts to share. And that's what happened for me, being in academic medicine in a predominantly white environment, and then being tasked with a DEI role that I was not empowered. I was not empowered to do. And that became a very radicalizing moment for me. And people would look at me and say, "What, you would actually be at a place where you felt average? Look at your bona fides. Look at where look, your mom was a doctor. You're the first part of the first Black mother-daughter legacy graduates from Harvard Medical School." No, it didn't matter. Yeah. And so, a lot for me has changed over the last 4 years, especially since, the murder of Mr. George Floyd. Even though I was doing the work, I founded my organization Advancing Health Equity when I was still in academic medicine. Because I said, even though this is not working for me, hopefully I could still do this work and then stay in academic medicine, because I loved the environment. I mean, I found it so intellectually stimulating, interacting with trainees, the research, the education. I loved it. That's all I knew.
The rigor.
The rigor, yes. And when I made that decision to leave, because I was essentially in this DEI role that was just a figurehead role, and I was so demoralized in that role. When I made the decision to leave, I also knew, and I haven't revealed this either, but I was also offered the Associate Dean of Diversity position at my alma mater at Harvard Med School as well. But I turned that down and said, "I'm out. I'm out. I am done with being in environments where I don't feel appreciated." And like Aletha said, I'm not saying everyone should be out. For me, that was a very personal. It was deeply personal. I've shared that it was a life-saving decision, and I know people in this room know what I mean by life-saving, right? Because we've actually seen, especially Black women in leadership positions, actually take their own lives because of, in higher education, being in toxic environments. So I feel like, like so many of us in here, many of us, we weren't surprised by what happened during the pandemic, right? We were very, very much aware of the deep fissures within our healthcare system, right? And how our communities did not have the access and the information that they needed. And so I feel like 2020 was like, I told you so. And as Lauren Powell, who was up here, she said that what we're seeing right now is based on the Einstein law, she said, for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it's not surprising that folks in power are now feeling threatened and want to, peel back what we see. And we've seen this in the past. This is literally nothing new. But I do want to give a shout out to leaders like Dr. Lawson, leading National Medical Association, and so deeply grateful to you doing the very difficult, challenging work, coalition building, meeting with our legislators, because they need to understand. Now we have the Educate Act, the first piece of federal legislation to go against DEI in medical education, to essentially defund medical schools who have DEI programs. Hopefully it won't pass, but this is a harbinger to us. We need to pay attention and dig down really deep. Dig down deep.
So you gave that really important example, right? That there's legislation that's looking to defund medical education. Can you really speak to a couple of other examples, small, low-hanging fruit, or bold, and how we could advance health equity, pay attention to it, keep our eye on the ball? There's so much going on, right? As soon as there's one disaster, our eye goes to the other. But we need to pay attention to these small bits of legislation that are building that eventually just dismantles everything. Can you give us a couple of examples or highlights that might make us pay attention?
Well, I can speak to one, and I think this specifically within medicine, and many of you have probably heard, and the dermatologists are aware as well. So medicine, I've learned so much from being in AMA in terms of how influential organized medicine is in creating health care. I'll say health care and public health policy too, because of the lack of, I think, knowledge, interest, desire, money. There isn't as much advocacy for public health, right? In terms of investment from the context of medicine. That is my experience from reading history. It's my experience now. But so much influence that if organized medicine as an institution decides not to support something or support something, that is what they're going to strongly advocate for or not. And so when you have an organized group of physicians, and it's the Association of American Dermatologists a few months ago, prior to kind of the anticipation of the meeting that they're going to have, and every group of organized medicine groups, they vote on policies that they're going to end up advocating for, right? So when one of the physicians put forward, a group of physicians put forward banning anti-DEI and that's important. Banning
DEI programs.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And that's important from the local sunset. Okay, so they put a proposal forward to sunset, thank you, the policies as it related to supporting DEI in medical education and ban it.
In dermatology, might I say, we're less than 2% of all dermatologists are Black, and Black people are often have delayed diagnoses because dermatologists don't know how to take care of us. So.
Right. Yes.
Sorry.
And then, that's okay, because to me there's a point to that too, is that I think that's a signal. And there are many physicians across the United States that feel the same way, and the folks who put the legislation forward, are physicians. Mm-hmm. These are physicians.
Yeah. And they were program chairs, residency programs. Directors. They were chairs of departments at very well-known academic medical centers.
Yes, that we both interact with in many different ways, and we can talk about violence and threats and all those things because that kind of comes back at us, at the front end and back end. Yep. So I bring up the dermatologist. That is an example. I actually happened to be there. I was invited to give a keynote speech. You get invited to these things months beforehand, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was there for the keynote speech that day, and so I went at it, But what was beautiful to see, and this to me speaks to the need of, NMA, environments such as this, some of the coalitions that I know Reed Tuckson was leading during COVID, the spaces for us that are led by us, with us, is that they have the Skin of Color Society in ADD, which is and they're large, and they're powerful, and they're consistent, and they've been around for many years. I think Susan Taylor is the physician who started it. I believe it's really that core piece that armed them with the ability to kind of organize in the way that they needed to at that moment. Not only convincing physicians of color, because it's a small part, as Uche said, but the white physicians, and really finding who their allies and their accomplices are in that moment. So something like that would not pass. So, I think that is definitely a clear example of the risk or what kind of is here, but also the opportunity if we're organized well enough.
And that's what Reed was really talking about, staying prepared and organized so that when an issue, whether it's vaccine, whether it's next pandemic, you just flip the switch and we're there, And so these kinds of gatherings, you talked about walking the room, it felt like a giant hug. We need to continue to be consistent in convening so that there's a problem, let's go at it.
And I should add that our dermatology colleagues reached out to people outside of dermatology also.
Oh,
Yeah, they reached out to those of us who have platforms, and we don't have to be accountable to anyone.
there you go.
And we made sure
Yep,
we made sure to have their back,
okay,
because we're not going to tolerate that.
there you go. That's the other thing, full support, yeah, absolutely. You talked about violence and threats, and that's real in this space because there's an onslaught against DE&I. Can you talk a little bit about how you show up authentically at work, on teams, inside, outside, or can you? Well, you already said you show up authentically anyway, but how you do that, and then how the culture of the place supports or aligns or pushes back on it.
I can start. Well, I'll just say, well, now I work for myself. And I'm not saying everyone needs to work for themselves, but that's what I needed. I needed to be able to create the kind of work culture that I needed. And I have to say, it's interesting because up until from pre-K to sixth grade, I've been in predominantly Black environments. I grew up in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, mostly African American, Afro-Caribbean area, and then I started, having to navigate predominantly white environments. And even though my parents really instilled in my twin sister Oni and I a very strong sense of our Black identity, there's something that happens when you're in these environments, that you internalize the anti-Blackness. And then I think going into medicine, that whole experience of being socialized into medicine, so many of us were, I think, very dynamic people. That's why we got accepted to medical school. But, being in those environments that are sometimes, very traditional, sometimes very conservative, it can beat that out of you. And it was interesting because, and then being in academic medicine where you also have to watch what you say. You can't really say things as authentically as you want to say. And I remember once I left academic medicine and I was an exclusive contributor for MSNBC, my talent agent, who's a wonderful Black woman who supports me in my message, she pulled me aside and she says, "Uche, I want you to know that our talent development person has a message for you." I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, he wants to let you know that you can say whatever you want to say." And I almost cried because he said, "Tell her that they call for you because they want to hear your perspective as a Black woman, as a Black parent, as a Black physician."
Full permission.
Yes, yes. And I realized that I was almost waiting for that permission.
Right.
Because I was so used to being in these environments where, literally, you're silenced and muzzled sometimes, right?
Yes.
You can't say certain things.
Right.
And so, and I know it's still a challenge when you are in an organization to show up as your full authentic self, especially for us because we have these lived experiences we know what it's like to be in medicine, right? As physicians, leadership roles, but then also we have our lived experiences as Black people and Black women,
Right.
that inform all of what we do.
And even as physicians, watching other physicians care for. So you have this,
Yes.
what are they doing?
Yeah, and that's what I feel like. I write about that, things that I observed, in my residency and even in started medical school, but things that I observed in residency with respect to our patients with sickle cell disease, like how they were stigmatized and how I was essentially taught to have suspicion about them by my senior residents and my supervising physicians, being like, you can't trust them. Only give them a certain amount of pain medication. Yeah. This is, I mean, and so, you internalize all of that. But what did I want to say? I wanted to say that I just think it's so important because, and I've shared this before, we are the gifts to these organizations.
Yes.
And often we forget that. The experiences that we come from, the ability that we have from often being on the margins and looking in, we are able to have a critical perspective on how these organizations function.
Absolutely.
And then they have the nerve to not appreciate our
gift.
perspective. Yes, the gift.
gift.
And so that's what I want to make sure, that we all, it's so important to remember.
Yeah. And so the gift of appreciation, someone on an earlier panel said that there's a business case that is often made for DE&I. What's the value of having diverse physicians taking care of, right? There's many, are you looking for it? Oh, your water. It's okay, it's okay. So tremendous value in having DE&I, making it either the business case, the moral case, but we often forget all of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Like, I think,
Well, that's your
I-
front and center.
Because I think that has to be our front and center in order to do this work. And I understand the business case in the context because we're in institutions that are making money. They need to understand, or they don't need to, but they want to. That is their language. I get it, but I feel we all need to remember the moral case. Like, we all deserve love, all of it.
Humanity, dignity.
All of it, and that's what we deserve at the core of this. And we shouldn't be swayed from that or convinced of anything other than that. We are in institutions that value money. That's the bottom line. The other part that I want to kind of bring to kind of how to showing up at work, this is the value of when we do have mentors and leaders who we followed. So I was at New York City Department of Health, and Dr. Mary Bassett, who many of you know, was the commissioner. She was my boss. She's the one who brought me into the New York City Department of Health when I was like 31 years old, as an assistant commissioner where everyone was much older, but she saw something that was there and that was critically important, and that institution lacked diversity. It was all, mostly Columbia grads. And what I learned from her and my mother as well is just the context of advocacy, so creating space for not just me, but for those who are around me. And in that process of doing so, being able to show up as myself. And so that I learned, I just went back to the New York City Department of Health. They had a pro-Black summit on how to do emergency preparedness. This is at a New York City, like a health department, talking pro-Black. And I just realized the time of being under her, she valued whomever it was. It wasn't just even us as Black people, who you were. She created space and she allowed her teams and employees to show up in that way. And a lot of that I realized coming to it's why I think I've been able to come to the AMA in the way that I have, in such a kind of, I don't know if it's a bold way, but I show up how I show up. Mm-hmm. And that's because I had like a confidence builder, 8 years before to say, no, this is who you are. It's okay, show it. And what you say and what you are saying is truth, it's fact. Don't let anybody discredit it, and if they do, then kind of come around and go for them. But that's how I was taught and raised within the context of health institutions.
And just the thought that if we're not able to show up as our full authentic selves, it's a loss for the environments that we work in. Mm-hmm. Even though it's not thought of like that,
Yep.
It really is a profound, profound loss.
And others are observing you. So I'm going to move us to mentoring, right? You started a group on mentoring. There are residents, directors who are all looking up and watching you. And so if you're not showing up as your full authentic selves, what are you telling them as students of color coming through the academic system saying, I don't know if I want that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely they are watching. And I know for me, when I left academic medicine, the issue that I had a lot of guilt about was leaving our students and trainees. But they have reached out to me over the years and said, oh no, Dr. Blackstock, do not feel badly. Don't feel badly at all. You actually inspire us because now we see there are alternative journeys that you can take, that there's no predetermined road that you have to take as a physician, and that we can be health advocates, we can use social media, we can, just use different avenues to make a difference for our communities. But I think it's important for us to be able to give that space to them so that they can think outside of the box, because I think many of us, and I know for myself included, for a long time, I was just checking off boxes. like, okay, med school, residency, I did a fellowship, I got a faculty position, and I don't know if I ever really asked myself, Uche, are you truly fulfilled? Are you truly happy? Or like, what do you really want?
Do, yeah. Let's talk about mentoring. Your own mentors, one or two things that they had shared with you, and then what you share with the next gen.
Exactly like kind of what our conversation was just now. One is just the gut, following your gut. And I think most of us in this room have such a strong gut. Tells us what's right, what's wrong, where we should be, where we shouldn't be. And sometimes we're challenged on how to respond to what our bodies are telling us. But I tell young people and share with young people all the time, pay attention to that. It means something. That is your guiding post. And the more you follow it, the more confidence you have in it. Folks would always ask, what are you doing 5 years from now? And so I was sitting with somebody actually last week, a woman who, with all good intention, was trying to coach me. And I was like, okay. And she said, no, you must know what you want to do. And I'm like, no, all I know, I want to rest. I want to become a lady of leisure. Like, I'm not joking, though. And the thing, I'm really not joking.
Yeah.
And I want to figure out how to build wealth. I want to do arts and health and just like all these things, right? But most people not everybody gets that, right? And so for young people, you, and don't let anybody doubt. I'm not talking to you. Well, we're young. I didn't mean to say it that way, but I don't want to feel like I'm talking at you all in that way. But that you are young, and don't let anyone tell you what you can be, who you believe in, what you see for yourself. Like if you see it, you're going to be it. Like, I truly believe that. And so let the young people having that confidence in themselves.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off of that, what I would say is that gut, that feeling, like that's our ancestors speaking to us. That's when I feel that feeling, like this doesn't feel right, or like I gotta go. I'm like that's generations saying no, you need to. This is not an environment that's where you're thriving in. We need to make a tough decision. And I also tell the young people to be really clear about what their purpose is, and it may not be very, they may not have it all determined, carved out, but what their purpose is, what their vision is, and what your values are. Like, what are your values? And making sure that you are always reminding yourself or asking yourself, am I in alignment? Am I in alignment? Because I think for many of us, and we often find ourselves in environments where the environment's misaligned with us.
Yeah.
Right? So I would tell young people, definitely think about that. And then also, again, along the lines of, remembering we're the ones with the gifts, that a lot of times, taking that leap of faith, surround yourself by people who encourage you, who see your gifts, who can be brave in their own lives. Like, don't ever, I think Brene Brown talks about, don't talk to people or get advice from people who haven't been brave in their own lives. Just be careful about that. Because sometimes you may have ideas and plans, and you don't want anyone to squash them. Right. So I think that's really important.
So earlier, Dr. Reed Tuckson, I love saying that, Dr. Reed Tuckson.
Such a great name.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So Dr. Tuckson mentioned we're really good at convening. We're really good at bringing folks together, more fireside chats, but we're not so good at moving into action. And so how might we, just one or two examples, again, low-hanging fruit or be big and bold, to move us into doing something that would advance health equity? Maybe it's clinical trials, maybe it's community research. What might we do to do even the low-hanging fruit, the policy that's getting ready to, what could we do to either reverse it or to tell people about it? Because this group is ready to do. We all know a lot of what we're talking about. Anything that we could do, small, big, bold?
Well, first, I just want to frame in the context of structures and systems, because we all respond.
I knew you were going to go there because I was going to go there. yes. I'm so glad.
Well, you're going to say it. Well, you'll have your piece to it, too.
Oh, that's okay. I'm glad.
Yeah. It is not easy for us to come together in the ways that I think every single one of us has the intention to do and desire to do. but we are set up within our institutions of which, and this is the intention of white supremacy, right, and power, is to divide, to other, to oppress, to exhaust, all of it. Where when we're in the institutions that we all tend to be, it's harder to come together. And then there are all these parameters and boundaries. I'm going through it right now. Contracting, all those things are important, yes, but some things are not needed. And we are subject to that when we're in institutions. So I think it's harder when we're in institutions to come together in that way. So I just want to speak to barriers in that context of systems and structures. And all of us understand what action is about. We understand how to go through, we all know for the basics of what it means to do a strategic plan and to have action behind it. It's now coming together. And I do think, and I mentioned this, I think, in our previous panel, about the context of solidarity and what does that mean in this day and age. How do we show up in solidarity, being present with one another to actually do collective planning outside of or inside and with our institutions is our challenge of the day. I also feel that if we don't figure that out, to his point, we're going to be in trouble. Like, we are in a time, and it's not just solidarity for us as Black people. I mentioned the Black Panthers before, the intention and knowledge that it has to be it's a multiracial, effort, coalition, and identity, as was earlier spoken about for people with disability. We have to learn what it means to become solidarity and have greater impact and collective impact. It is needed for right now, and we have to push ourselves. And then, because Wisdom's sitting right there, and she was just talking with me about some of the work she's doing at Headspace, because it just is on top of my head as an example of when you go into community, and Dr. Thea James also, I'm going to get to her, going into community and building with folks in community. People are doing it. Mm-hmm. It's not that people aren't, and I don't want to negate all the work and efforts that we're doing. I think there are different levels of where we need greater collective impact. So it's whether it's at the neighborhood level, institutional level, or the structural kind of policy level. We need it all, but I'm very careful about, this is where a little intergenerational difference of saying that folks aren't doing it and they're not good at it. Because I think we're actually very awesome at it. And we don't have the resources, the financial ability to do it in the way that we intend to do it or want to do it. We're exhausted, the time to do it, time and money.
Time and money.
Right, but I feel the spirit is always there. That's who we are.
Yeah. And just, I mean, a lot of the points that Dr. Maybank just made, I wanted to also share. And I'll say that I can't remember did someone mention Black Panthers? Did you do it earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So, all that to say is, like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, essentially what you're saying. Like, so many of the solutions we know in terms of how do we holistically care for our communities are solutions that have been out there for a very, very, very long time. And that we can use as a blueprint, right? And then also thinking about what you're saying is that there are so many community-based organizations rooted in our communities that are already doing the work. Like, there's so many doing work around Black maternal health. Like, so how can we connect with them? How can we engage with them? How can we uplift the work that's already been that's being done? Because I think ultimately, I do believe, like, I think for us, a community-centered model of care is what's going to be the best for us. I don't think hospitals, health systems, we see where we are already with statistics. I do think that we see how FQHCs actually do a really wonderful job in our communities. I think we need to think about how can we center that work more in our communities.
I like that. So really community driven, focus centered. Is Michael Curry still here? Yeah, that's his world.
And outside of medicine, yes. Like, it's not just medicine people. There's lawyers, there are lawyers rather, media, we have to have all types of sectors at the table together to plan for our communities, because we all have interest in that as well.
We can't be in our silos. I feel like we've been in our silos for a very long time.
Okay.
Even when thinking about like public space, right? Like how that impacts health. I mean, there's so many connections with like sociology, city planning, anthropology, right? And so we need to think about how does healthcare and medicine intersect with all other disciplines.
Food is medicine is another space that we can do better in. So the floor is open if you have questions, if you want to ask our panelists any questions. Oh, okay. Dr. Gray, stand and introduce yourself.
Daryl Gray. Aletha, well, Dr. Maybank, Dr. Blackstock. Dr. Maybank, we've kind of talked on the side about the importance of rest.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked a lot about
They're going to give you a microphone.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Maybank, we've talked separately about the importance of rest, and you've even shared here you're looking forward to the vacation. You've also mentioned the word exhaustion. Dr. Blackstock, you've mentioned similar things in talks that I've heard you give previously as well. Can you speak to the audience about the importance of rest in the context of advancing health equity?
Yes, and we are often, I guess, raised in our environments that we have to work. Rihanna. And that's a generation, that's been passed down to us for many reasons. My family's from Antigua.
Lady with the flower.
Work. And so even in the context of justice, it also felt like it was a lot of work and not the space for joy, or at least that's not what's passed down. In a very creating intentional space for joy. Let me be more clear. Not that folks didn't laugh when they were in community, didn't, celebrate at particular times, but this, how do you really intentionally create space for joy and rest? So during COVID, one of my friends, Gordon Chambers, who's an artist, singer, songwriter for some well-known folks, I was taking music therapy. I was doing music therapy because I needed therapy. It was a tough time. And he said, Aletha, you come in here and you talk about, the justice, and I get it all. He says, but remember, your ancestors were fighting not only for your freedom, but for your joy and for your rest. And so I want you to go out and find it. And so, and I'll never forget the day of walking out there and just being more intentional of just the little things, like, I'm going to get mint chocolate chip ice cream today, whatever it was, from the big to the small, and creating that space. And so then I'm going to blank on her name. She wrote Rest is Resistance. It was published. Trisha, thank you. That Ministries, yes, Trisha Hershey. I bought my entire team for the holidays her book. And then the next year, they got the flashcards this year. And then this year, we're working on rest and recovery plans. So Equal Well is a group that does work with folks and institutions on this. And so it's hard, sometimes I feel a little bit not fully genuine in the sense of I don't want to set my team up within the institution for something they're not going to fully have of what they're about to learn and embark upon. So it's being very careful with the messaging around that. But the whole point is, how do we create the intentionality around that and pass that down, and that it's okay to do that. We're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that question, because I think especially whether you're doing any kind of work that is challenging, and then especially carrying the identities that we carry, it is exhausting. So yes, we have to be very intentional about creating the time and space. So I do a lot of different things. I do affirmations. If you see my mirror at home, it's covered in Post-it notes. I try to be very intentional about I get my 8 hours of sleep. I do. I tell my kids they have to go to bed so that I can go to bed. Like, I'm in bed by 9:30 most nights. And I have a wonderful therapist that I've been seeing for the last five years that has held me down during both personal and professional life transitions. I'm so indebted to her. And so just but a lot of times I have to remind myself, like, Uche, slow down. And I think about, and I wrote about this in Legacy, this interaction I had with my mother, the original Dr. Blackstock, who was only 47 when she passed away. She's a year older than I I am now. I'm 46. And I remember I was a sophomore, it was sophomore in college, and we were having one of our long conversations on the phone. It was one night, of Saturday night, all my friends were at a party. And I said to her, it was a tough conversation. I said, Mommy, what are things that I should know when I get older? And she said, remember to take care of yourself. And of course, as a 19-year-old, I was 19 at the time, I didn't get it because, it was just my mom telling me that, right? But now as a 46-year-old, as a founder, as a CEO, as an author, as a parent, as a partner, I get it. At the time I didn't see my mother and all the complexity that she was. But that advice I carry with me everywhere. Take care of yourself, and there are not enough people. Making sure you surround yourself by people who remind you that too. That is love as well. Yeah.
And Uche, and you're doing a great job at it. I will say I'm still working on it. Like I'm tired because I've created it for myself. Yeah, I'm clear about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's
I have a hard
always
time
work in
still
progress.
saying no, right?
Yeah.
But there will be changes, so
We have time for one more. Dr. Gigi?
Absolutely. First of all, I think I represent some of the older folks in the audience. We are so proud of you, each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank you, Dr. Christie.
I just want to bring up something that I don't think enters the discourse very much, and that is tokenism. Somebody, I won't say who, because you would recognize her as one of my patients, said to me, we're on our way out of the clinic. I was escorting her. And she said, Gigi, your parents must be so proud of you. Subtext, right? I said, actually, Mrs. So-and-so, yeah, my parents think I'm pretty special, but I'm one of millions. And so the intoxication and the seduction of tokenism, and the importance of us. I mean, part of the way that I get my energy and am inspired is actually by looking at people who don't have the letters behind their names and remembering them to give a hand up to and to think about them in real time, not in some abstract, those people in that community, but, right there. So just would want to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think so many of us have been in that situation. I mean, I've been the only so many times. I write about it in Legacy. I was the only emergency medicine faculty in my department. It was the largest emergency medicine department in the city, in New York City. It's either me or one other person, But you can never stay clueless for long because you'll always be reminded of who you are. But yeah, no, obviously those are systemic issues, right? Those are systemic issues. There are reasons why I am never happy being the only. I want to bring everyone up with me, and so that's why I always say what did Ruha Benjamin? She said something about representation. Like representation is not enough. We need representation and also folks who are thinking about all the same critical issues that we care about deeply as well.
And I would just add, I think also a part of tokenism. So at AMA, I was very clear with them in the beginning. I've said this in my meeting. I'm not going to be a token. I'm not going to. And so that's probably part of my drive. There's then the trade-off of it. Part of my drive is to make sure I'm not going to be a token because I don't want to be in an institution where I don't have some level of productivity that's important for my people and for health equity. And so I also think that this concept of tokenism, I try not to embody it. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I just try not to embody it because I think there's a part of me that so defends it because I don't want to be that person, but maybe I am that person, and I don't realize I'm that person. I hear that on one level, but I'm just saying the internal conversations just to be, open about it, of what goes around in the head. And so I think I just have to believe, I said that I am in this space and it is meaningful, it's impactful, it's important. I know my values. and to kind of ride on those and ignore the noise that questions if I'm a token or not, whomever it comes from. And so that's just more the personal context of it, more so than what everybody else says about it.
Please join me in celebrating these two fearless leaders.
Thank you,
We
Valarie.
wish you rest, we wish you love, and we wish you safe passage. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And they always say to give folks their flowers while they're here. We have some deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll stay afterwards, after the program, if anyone wants me to sign their copies.
Oh, that's right, between 3 and 4, Dr. Blackstock will be here.